Why do some of the people closest to you begin to resent, resist, or even attack you the moment you start changing for the better? Why does your healing seem to provoke hostility rather than support? Carl Jung's depth psychology offers a precise and liberating answer. Your growth threatens the inner equilibrium that others have worked hard, often unconsciously, to maintain. You become a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable. This video distills Jung's key ideas: shadow, projection, persona, individuation, the collective unconscious, anima, animus, and the transcendent function, to explain why your transformation can feel like a declaration of war to the people around you, and why their reaction is not proof you're wrong, but confirmation you're on the path that matters. The mirror. Nobody asked for your growth and their shadow. Jung believed that each of us carries a shadow, the disowned, repressed, denied parts of ourselves that we'd rather not face. The shadow contains everything we find unacceptable: jealousy, rage, neediness, envy, fragility, as well as power, confidence, ambition, and other traits we've been taught to disapprove of. We don't eliminate the shadow by pretending it isn't there. We either integrate it consciously or project it onto others. When you begin to heal, to set boundaries, to stop people-pleasing, to say no, to cultivate self-respect, you start integrating your own shadow. You become more whole. But for those still running from their own unacknowledged parts, your wholeness is blinding. Your boundaries illuminate their lack of boundaries. Your calm exposes their chaos. Your self-acceptance accentuates their self-rejection. And instead of asking, "What is this bringing up in me?" it is far easier to say, "You've changed, and I don't like it." This is projection in action, one of Jung's most pivotal insights. Rather than wrestle their own demons, people often hand them to you. You become the villain in a story they don't want to rewrite. "You've changed" really means my control over you is dying. Jung observed that we are all born into roles: family roles, cultural roles, social roles. And we put on personas, or masks, to manage those roles. The persona isn't inherently bad. It's a necessary interface with the world. But trouble begins when people mistake the mask for the face. Entire relationships, especially in families, can crystallize around who you're supposed to be, not who you are. When you stop playing your assigned character, you threaten the entire script. People invested in the illusion will panic because your authenticity invalidates the identity they constructed in relation to you. The cry of "you've changed" is often the lament of someone mourning the death of their projection, not the death of your true self. Individuation, the journey that costs you your old life. For Jung, the central psychological task of life is individuation, becoming who you truly are, independent of collective expectations and the internalized narratives of others. Individuation is not narcissism. It's the conscious integration of all parts of the psyche: the shadow, the anima, animus, the persona, into a coherent whole, where the self, the totality of who you are, becomes the guiding center, not just the ego. Here's the price Jung warns us about. Individuation often severs the bonds that were tied to your false self. When people are attached to your compliance, your silence, your niceness, your constant availability, your unhealed self, your growth is a betrayal to them. They're not grieving the real you, they're grieving the convenient you, and you can't be both whole and convenient. The collective unconscious. Why groups mobilize against your freedom. Jung posited the existence of the collective unconscious, a shared layer of the psyche populated by universal patterns, archetypes, and collective assumptions that invisibly govern societies, families, and cultures. This collective layer thrives on conformity. It wants the system to function with minimal disruption. When you refuse to perpetuate generational trauma, Stop enabling dysfunctional dynamics or step out of the loyalty-bound identity your group has assigned you. The system experiences you as a threat. It mobilizes to bring you back in line. That's why it can feel like everyone turns against you at once. Not just individuals, but an entire field of expectation pushing back. You are refusing to play a role the system relies upon. Integrating the anima and animus. Wholeness offends fragmentation. Jung wrote that every psyche has both masculine and feminine psychological aspects, which he called the animus, masculine principle in the feminine psyche, and anima, feminine principle in the masculine psyche. Cultures often demand that we split off or suppress one side to fit gendered norms. Compassion without assertiveness gets rewarded for some. Assertiveness without tenderness for others. When you integrate both, becoming both gentle and strong, empathetic and boundaried, you reveal the artificiality of those cultural splits. You're and threatens their either-or. People attack in you what they've been forbidden to allow in themselves. Your balanced strength exposes their lopsided identity. The transcendent function, holding the tension until you transform. Jung's concept of the transcendent function is the engine of psychological evolution. The capacity to hold opposing forces, love and anger, loyalty and autonomy, surrender and assertion, in conscious tension until a new level of consciousness emerges. Rather than collapsing into one side or the other, you contain the paradox long enough to become larger than it. This is where you become unpredictable to those governed by unconscious patterns. You're no longer available for binary thinking. You can be compassionate and say no. You can be peaceful and fierce. You can choose solitude and connection. That flexibility terrifies people whose self-concept depends on fixed positions and rigid roles. Your fluidity destabilizes their certainty. Signs you're triggering the system, and why that's okay. 1. Sudden character assassination. People rewrite your history to justify their discomfort. Your past kindness becomes manipulation. Your new boundaries become selfishness. 2. Collective whisper campaigns. Individuals form alliances to make sense of your change, seeking consensus to validate their projections. 3. Guilt-laced nostalgia. You used to be so is used to lure you back into the role that kept everyone comfortable. 4. Pathologizing your growth. Labels like cold, selfish, or difficult get applied not because you are those things, but because you're not submitting to old dynamics. 5. Escalating tests. People push harder. Boundary violations, emotional bait, dramatic ultimatums to see if you'll regress to the version they could control. If you recognize these, you're likely not on the wrong path. You're simply leaving the wrong stage. How to keep growing when they can't stand your growth. 1. Name the projection. You don't have to accept what others hand you. Ask, is this mine or is this their shadow in disguise? 2. Honor the grief. Individuation requires mourning the relationships that existed only when you played small, the version of you that mastered survival through compliance and the approval you once lived on. 3. Differentiate compassion from compliance. Compassion acknowledges the pain others feel as you change. Compliance sacrifices your becoming to soothe their discomfort. Don't confuse the two. 4. Stay with the tension. Practice Jung's transcendent function. Hold your need for belonging alongside your need for authenticity. Don't collapse into people-pleasing or total isolation. Let the higher synthesis reveal itself. 5. Build a new collective. If the old group can't tolerate your authenticity, cultivate a community that can. Individuation is personal, but it is not meant to be solitary. Find mirrors that reflect your wholeness not your fragmentation. 6. Keep integrating the shadow. Every accusation is an opportunity to check your own blind spots. Growth invites humility. Sometimes they're projecting, and sometimes they're right. Let discernment, not defensiveness, lead. 7. Remember the deeper task. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That privilege is also a responsibility to yourself and indirectly to the collective. Every person who chooses authenticity over conformity slightly reconfigures the field for everyone else. The price and privilege of becoming yourself. The hatred, resentment, or confusion you're facing isn't evidence that you've lost your way. It's confirmation that you are no longer funding a system with your self-betrayal. Your authenticity destabilizes inherited patterns. It reveals the fault lines in collective agreements. That will always provoke resistance, from within you and around you. The deeper question then isn't, why do they hate me? But, am I strong enough to keep becoming despite their hatred? Individuation is costly, but so is a life lived in disguise. Jung's work reminds us that there is a self within you, whole, integrated, paradox-embracing, that is worth every lost approval, every broken role, every illusion that had to die. When people say, "You've changed," let your answer be simple. I finally stopped pretending. Reflection prompts. First, which relationship?